Okay, welcome to another session of our Lagos and its environs class, GSS 121. Today we'll be focusing on dynastic tussles and British intervention in chieftaincy affairs in Lagos. So we'll look at the process through which the British intervened in the political affairs in Lagos and which paved the way to the colonization of Lagos. So the first half of the 19th century was a period of rising commercial prosperity for Lagos. Okay, so but it was also one of dynastic and political squabble for the most part of the period. In the end, the Lagos monarchy lost its political authority to the British, who intervened and profited from the dynastic wrangling in Lagos. So as a matter of fact, the British, as we have noted, had been on ground for a number of years, observing as one major event that we've noted occurred in the 19th century was the abolition of the slave trade. And with the abolition of the slave trade, it was important for the British to switch to more profitable schemes that will probably contribute to generating or maximizing the resources in this environment. Remember, we noted that for centuries during the transatlantic slave trade, the Europeans only restricted themselves to the coast of West Africa, to Lagos. In Lagos, perhaps they didn't go far deep into the interior to know. So with the abolition of the slave trade, and the development of commodity trade, it was necessary for the Europeans to transition into the exploitation of the readily available resources in Lagos, in Nigeria, for instance. So of course, they had to capitalize, this had to be based on a particular event. So the British, following the abolition of the slave trade, had been looking for opportunities to intervene in the political or the socio-economic systems in Lagos. And this was actually made possible with the dynastic crisis that erupted in the 19th century. The genesis of the troubles is to be traced to the succession struggle which accompanied the death of Ologun Kutere in 1811, who was the Oba of Lagos. So it seems indeed that Lagos rulers were titled Ologun Kutere until the British eruption in 1852. So the deceased ruler Ologun Kutere, for instance, who was the Oba during this period, had three eligible sons, namely Osilokun, the eldest, then Adele and Akitoye. Unfortunately, to the disappointment of the eldest, Osilokun, Adele was appointed by the chiefs to succeed to the throne, and this brought about a dynastic rift, which led to the expulsion of Osilokun from Lagos in 1816. But some of the Adele's policies also, the king, gradually made him unpopular, and leading to his removal in 1821. In this case, Osilokun was recalled from exile to succeed back to the throne, and this contributed to a lot of squabbles and skirmishes. Adele in this regard fled to Badagry, where he succeeded in making himself recognized as the ruler of the town. But unfortunately, Osilokun died, and he was succeeded by his own son, Idewu Ojulari, in 1829. So Adele saw this as an opportunity to regain the throne of Lagos, given that his major enemy has died and his puppet, his son, has been crowned. So, but his military, he made several attempts to regain Lagos, the throne of Lagos, but his military attack on Lagos failed. However, whatever support Idewu himself had on the throne, he was compelled to commit suicide in mid-1837, perhaps due to maybe this tyrannical, maybe because the people didn't probably enjoy his reign. So Idewu's younger brother, in this case Kosoko, made a bid for the throne, but he was unsuccessful. So in the face of a threatened military aggression by Adele, who was in the event restored to the throne, his reign was short-lived, having lasted for just 3 months. So his restoration to the throne followed on the heels of the Egba conquest of Ota, which took place among after the fall of Oyo, at the end of 1837. These were some of the factors. So the pattern of the dynastic crisis continued through the middle of the 19th century. After Adele's death in 1837, Adele's death in 1897 was followed again by a succession dispute between Adele's son called Oluwole and Kosoko, that is Oshilokun's son. Oluwole succeeded to the throne, and in this case, Kosoko was expelled from the town. Oluwole, unfortunately, again died prematurely in 1841, and Kosoko was not around to press his claim, and the throne passed on to an elderly member of the ruling dynasty. This was Akintoye, a younger brother to both Oshilokun and Adele, all right, and therefore he was an uncle to Idewu and Kosoko. So, but against the better judgment of his supporters, Akintoye went ahead to recall Kosoko from exile, being a good, a nice and friendly brother. So he went to recall Kosoko from exile, who subsequently succeeded in ejecting him from the throne in 1845 in what is known as Ogun Olomiro saltwater water war in Lagos. So it was at this stage that Lagos dynastic problem became mixed with more potent forces during the 19th century. Though it is important to remember that in 1807, as we have noted, the British had abolished the slave trade, and in order to make effective this ban on slavery, the British had posted naval ships, especially on the West African coast, to intercept ships transporting slaves out of Africa. So the slave trade, therefore, had become illegal as far back as 1808 and also 1830s. And of course, what had become a legitimate trade had been introduced: the trade in palm oil, palm kernel, palm produce, and cocoa. So as a settlement was established, also called Freetown, to which ships carrying slaves that had been intercepted by the British were diverted. These slaves regained their freedom and they were sent to Sierra Leone to be trained. So at Freetown, most of these captives, as they were called, were converted into Christianity and were introduced to a number of vocations such as carpentry, tailor, mansery. Some of them also became successful traders. So incidentally, most of these captives were Yorubas and had been Yoruba who had been enslaved, and as a result of the war which characterized Yoruba, they were sent back to Lagos. So attempts by these returning slaves to resettle in Lagos, following the policies put in place by the British, were rebuked, were rejected by King Kosoko, who still had a lot of interest in the slave trade. To Kosoko, he was not ready to relinquish his interest in the slave trade. He felt that now I am the king of Lagos, and if other people had made money from the slave trade, it is now my turn to also make money from Lagos. So all the abolition strategies or policies put in place by the British, including reconverting the former slaves to Christianity, sending them to Sierra Leone and bringing them back to settle in Lagos, all of these were rejected by Kosoko. As a matter of fact, attempts were made by Kosoko to recapture some of these people and to resell them into slavery. So this was because Kosoko still favored the continued existence of the slave trade, which ran counter to Christianity and the legitimate trade on which the British were trying to build their interest. So meanwhile, Akintoye, after his expulsion in 1845 from Lagos, fled initially to Abeokuta and then to Badagry. These two towns were seen in favorable light by the British because of the introduction of Christianity in those areas. So that was what was more of immediate importance, however, was that Akintoye came under the influence of the missionaries, who after eliciting an undertaking from him to suppress the slave trade and promote Christianity, they promised to assist him to secure back the throne in Lagos. So because they are already having issues with Kosoko, whose strategy and policies were against the interests of the British, Kosoko wouldn't want to relinquish the slave trade, his interest in the slave trade. And here's Akintoye in exile, who had gotten the support of the British, in restoring him back to the throne. So the dynastic crisis rumbling in Lagos was therefore to provide a situation exploited by the British to promote their interest in Lagos. Hence, late in December 1851, the British capitalized on Kosoko's refusal to to surrender his interest in the slave trade. The British ejected Kosoko and restored Akintoye and proceeded to establish a dominant influence in Lagos. So the British after this case appointed a consul for Lagos, and who had a very strong influence on Lagos king and his policies. Kosoko fled to Ekpe after his expulsion, and from where he made several armed attempts to regain Lagos throne, but all of these were thwarted by the British military presence there. So he was eventually allowed to return to Lagos in 1862. So one other major effect of Kosoko's presence at Ekpe was that some of his followers remained in the town when he returned to Lagos, and these were subsequently joined by other immigrants from Lagos. These Lagosians and their descendants are called Ekpeku, as distinct from original inhabitants who are the Jebus, and so they are called the Jebu Ekpe. So meanwhile, Akintoye died in 1853, but he was succeeded by his son Dosumu, whose reign the British went step further by taking over. Under whose reign the British went further by taking over. Lagos was annexed in 1851, was bombarded in 1851, under King Akintoye. But following the death of Akintoye, under the reign of Dosumu, his son, the British took a step further to annex Lagos, and of course took over Lagos, in which the complete political administration of Lagos under the British took place. So this event occurred in August 1861, when the British declared Lagos as a colony of the British. Again in 1863, the British brought under their new administration of Lagos, they annexed the Jebu coastal settlement of Lekki, Palma, which Kosoko had used as a commercial outlet during his stay in Ekpe. So in that same year, the British also brought Badagry under the Lagos colony. The establishment of British administration in Lagos, therefore, was accompanied by the presence of Christian missions. So indeed, after the restoration of Akintoye, it was made by the British to sign an anti-slave trade treaty, in 1852, in which he also undertook to offer protection to Christian missionaries in Lagos. Another effect of the British presence in Lagos was the influx of repatriates, from Sierra Leone, the repatriated slaves from Sierra Leone called Saro. So also following the gradual abolition of slavery in South America, especially Brazil and the West Indies, Yoruba-speaking repatriates came from these areas and settled increasingly. So unlike Kosoko, who wouldn't allow all of these repatriated slaves to settle, some of the terms of the treaty signed with Dosumu was that all of these were going to be allowed to settle down, be integrated into Lagos. So these were called the Amaru, possibly a contraction of America, unlike the Saro, who were usually Anglican and Methodists. The Amaros were Catholics. So the British presence in Lagos transformed the island into one of the leading emporia of West African coasts. The dominant items of trade instituted by the British after the annexation was palm oil, which came to Lagos from the Yoruba interior and sold to the European commercial companies based on the island. So what we have seen so far in this section is that it was through a kaleidoscopic process of politics that the British were able to intervene and assert themselves in Lagos. Of course, they capitalized on the refusal of King Kosoko to relinquish the slave trade. Initially, they played a very decisive role in the dynastic crisis between the children of Osilokun, who were contending for the throne, pitching one against one another in a way to be able to, and they ultimately realized that with Kosoko, who went against their own interests and it was under Kosoko that Lagos was bombarded in 1851. So thank you for listening to this section. See you in the next section. Thank you.